As Jamie and Reggie sat in the room, cups of coffee steaming in the simulated afternoon light streaming in from the holo display on the wall, the conversation lulled gently from idle chat to Reggie telling stories to a rapt Jamie. There was a soft voice that rang through their communicators. "Good afternoon. Would it be okay if I enter?" Jamie tensed slightly at the sound and stood to face the door, his guard still high to new people. Reggie just smiled and replied, "Please come in, Dorian. Mind your head on the low ceiling." As the door opened, Jamie looked at the entrance, taut like a bowstring, but trying not to show it. Then the Dracorlix walked through the door, to Jamie's eyes looking like a gigantic draconic robot, causing his eyes to flick from the huge dragon like being to Reggie and back. Reggie calmly placed a hand on his shoulder, reassuring him. "Please sit down, Dorian. I'd like to introduce you to Jamie, the hero of the hour," said Reggie with a flourish and a smile, gesturing at the chairs and then to Jamie. "Crud. I'd heard you were a specimen, but I'd never dreamed this was possible," said Dorian, walking slowly to one of the chairs at the table and taking a seat. "I thought Reggie was something to behold, but you are a literal biological marvel," he gushed, looking Jamie up and down, clearly at a loss as to what to say or do in that moment. Dorian, didn't you have some things you wanted to talk to Jamie about?" "I know he has questions too," said Reggie, with what sounded a bit like a sullen tone. "Sorry, friend. You're not jealous, are you?" teased Dorian. "You know I value your mind as well as your resilience. But yes, of course, ask away, bud," he said at a slow rhythm to his words, while appearing to take a long toke on a pipe-like apparatus. "What are Dracorlix? Why does the parasite like Sarlans?" said Jamie, a wrinkle forming on his brow as he sat on a chair opposite the visitor, his mannerisms still cagey. "Well, would you be opposed to a little bit of a reorganization here so that we could talk face to face?" said Dorian, another wisp of pink smoke coming from the pipe. "You might feel less on edge and it's easier to explain things." "I can't handle your gravity, you see, so I'd need to access the room pad," he explained. "Fine, go ahead," grunted Jamie, his gruffness a cover for his nerves. As he fought every instinct in him to try and remain seated, the Dracorlix stood up and turned to the pad on the wall, tapping it at speed. A few aspects of the room moved almost instantly, then a large frame emerged from where the bed had begun to ripple as the bed gave way to that and a large chair. The light in that space had also changed subtly, giving it a reddish glow. As the Dracorlix moved into the space, they seemed to heave a sigh of relief as they plugged the frame into their robotic suit, the suit hissing as it opened along the seams. The suit continued to lock into place on the frame, with each component part of it opening up to reveal the alien inside of it. Standing around 7 feet tall with dark gray skin, bordering on black, Dorian stepped out of the suit, revealing wings that sprouted from the upper middle of his back, the wings sporting a shiny metallic look to the leading edges along with his shoulders and the crest on their head. Their draconic look was not lost on Jamie as he eyed the 2 metallic claws that ended each limb and the rows upon rows of sharp-looking teeth in their mouth, oriented similarly to a shark's. "Please don't be alarmed, pal. I could no more hurt you than turn into a bedding nest," chuckled Dorian. "But now you can see me, and hopefully my vulnerability will reassure you that you needn't worry about me, my dude," he said warmly, stretching his tail and seeming to perk up by the second. "Oh, you're probably wondering what all this is," he said, gesturing at the changes he'd make to the room. "Well, I have very brittle supporting bodily structures, due to having very thin air on our homeworld that is high in oxygen. That's why I have to wear the suit on the ship and top up my ox levels with that pipe. Plus it tastes good that way, so it's always a bonus," he chuckled as he seated himself in the chair. Jamie seemed completely confused. How could something so terrifying looking be harmless? He thought to himself. "What you mean brittle?" he managed to grunt, the thoughts of what this guy even was still swimming in his brain. "Well, like I said, thin air calls for light weight to fly. Our prey is insects, and we evolved aluminium honeycomb to replace our structures over time with a symbiotic relationship to an organism on our homeworld that is found on those same insects. It's lightweight but strong in specific directions. So it works, but leaves us vulnerable to more robust types," he said, gesturing at Jamie. "However, after we left our homeworld to join the Council, we encountered a species that the organism that benefited us took a shine to, Sarlans. It consumes them," he said, his face betraying nothing. but his wings shifting and flapping at the mention of this. Jamie was rocked by this news. His mind was in turmoil. Nothing about this situation made sense. Here was the most dangerous-looking thing on the ship, supposedly infested with the most dangerous parasite on the ship, unfazed by it despite it having literally turned someone into a monster less than 24 hours ago. But it thinks I could crush it easily? Thought Jamie, his mouth agape at the whole scenario, totally unsure what to do. Why have you told me this? Jamie managed at long last. Reggie nearly died fighting the monster. Dorian shifted uncomfortably in his chair. That's why I'm here and disrobed. He seemed to grow small. If Reggie chooses it, I shall walk into the great void. I failed and people died, he said, a somber tone in his communications, and Jamie felt the emotional transference of deep remorse that leaked into it. Don't be ridiculous, cut in Reggie, a note of annoyance in his voice. You're always so dramatic, Dor. How the hell could you have known? Not even the scanners picked it up. He scoffed clearly, not entertaining the idea of his friend offering his life as recompense. Dorian flinched slightly at the outburst, but nodded and sat in silence while Jamie processed the interaction. For a moment, they all sat, drinking from their respective cups, and thinking until the silence was broken by Jamie of all people. What do we do now? Can we help the captain? Figured you'd know, he said to Dorian. I'm afraid not. There's only one course of action now that we have an infected Sarlin aboard. We have to take him to Death World 211. He will live out what's left of his life among others like him if there are any alive, said Dorian with a sigh. I'm sorry you two had to be the ones to be involved in this, but we should probably meet what's left of the crew, being as we three comprise the ranking officers and only pilot that still has both arms. For the third time in the last 20 minutes, Jamie looked totally stunned. His jaw gaping, he looked at the two of them, back and forth until he finally said, You're kidding, right?